Long month for some reason. Um, and I think the cold probably doesn't help, right? Sure, right? Exactly, right? Right. I still feel like I'm recovering from the pandemic in some ways. My gosh. Anyway, I know it's a little late, but happy New Year. But, I think this is my second time since this new year that I've been lucky enough to teach the GED live sessions here. So it looks like some people can't hear me. Maybe my co-teacher Laura, can you help out Leah, who apparently can't hear me in the chat, but everyone else can hear me okay? Right, you all? Some of you responded. Okay, so yeah, so there you go. So if you can't hear, please log out and back in, and that would be great. All right, cool. All right, so welcome everybody to GD Live. Again, these are tonight we have two hour-long sessions dedicated to social studies. So if you are here anticipating math or anticipating science, unfortunately, we're not doing science, we're not doing math, we're not doing RLA tonight. Tonight is social studies night here on GD Live. So again, we have 2 hour-long sessions scheduled for social studies. My name's Arthur again, and welcome everybody. If you have not done so already, please download the PDF. The link is in the chat, as you can see right there, in the chat window there. So feel free to click on that and save that PDF to your computer or tablet, whatever you're using to access today's session. And also, Leah. Okay, great. Leah, welcome. Welcome. Sorry about that technical issue we were having there, but sounds like you're good to go now. All right. Okay. Yeah, so again, for those of you who are just joining us, is anyone joining us actually? Go ahead and put this in the chat. Are you joining us for the first time today for GED live session, or is this your second time or third time, or have you been doing this all? You can call yourself a GED veteran if you'd like. So go ahead and put that in the chat. Are any of you joining us for GED live for your first time or second time or third time, or you've been doing this a while? So Max, this is your first time here. Khalid, yes, I know you're a vet. First time here for you as well. Okay, you've been doing Moses been doing a while. Okay, so some of you are like your first time. So for those of you, especially for those of you who are brand new to GD Live, just a couple things to help you out. Here. First, as you notice, we have our webinar chat, and our webinar chat is what you will use to communicate with me. I will ask you questions in class throughout this class, and you'll use the webinar chat to answer questions that I will ask you. And there's a reason for that. If you have any questions during tonight's class, please do not put them in the webinar chat. Do not put them in the webinar chat, because one of the great things about these online classes that we don't have just one teacher, in this case me, but put it in the Q&A. Exactly. Exactly. Roger, good to have you with us again as well. And any questions you have in class, please put them in the Q&A in Zoom, and that is where my co-teacher for tonight's class, that's teacher Laura, will be answering questions. You won't see or hear Laura on the tonight, but I assure you she is a real person. She is not AI. She is a real person, and she knows this material just as well, if not even better than I do. So if you do have any questions, bring them up in the Q&A, and we keep that Q&A kind of private because, again, sometimes people get a little self-conscious, right, about asking questions. You're kind of like, should I ask this question? Oh, what if I'm interrupting the class? Oh, what if this is a stupid question, right? Sometimes we think that, right? Well, I want to assure you, first of all, there are no stupid questions when it comes to GD Live and our material the material that we'll be covering tonight. But yeah, legitimately, maybe even your brain just kind of like just blanks out for a few seconds. You're like, wait, what was the answer to that last question? Or if you're like, hey, what did Arthur mean by this thing here? Right? That's where teacher Laura will be. She is very happy to help. I've known Laura for a long time. We've worked together a lot of these different Kaplan test prep programs. I assure you are in very good hands with teacher Laura. Now, I mentioned the webinar chat is used to communicate with me. This is where I will ask questions in class. And, I don't force participation. I will never call on an individual student and say, hey, hey, Roger, can you answer question number one? Like, you do not go on mic, you do not go on camera, anything like that in these classes. So your participation is completely optional, of course. But I'm sure Teacher Laura would agree that we know the students that get the most out of these classes are the ones who are actively participating in the webinar chat. So when I ask you a question, class, please chime in with an answer. So for instance, just as a little bit of an icebreaker, um, where are you located and how cold is it where you are right now? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Where are you located? Just give me a city and a state and about how cold is it right now? um, so Colorado, 40 degrees there. That's honestly 40 degrees. I would take 40 degrees right now because so Candida, you're in New Jersey. I see that kind of it's snowing where you are. Oh my gosh, Missouri's 20. Too much cold. Idaho 45. I would take 45 to be honest. I would not take Vermont. So Reagan, I hope you're staying warm, staying safe. Negative 12 up in Vermont. Oh my goodness. Um, Southern Kansas. So one of the reasons why I ask this is always because I want you to see that we get students from literally all over the country. In fact, sometimes we get students from outside of the United States as well. But I see again a lot of you. Oh my gosh, Jenny, I am very jealous of you right now. Logging in from Hawaii, where I imagine the weather is a little bit more pleasant, right, than than the vast majority of this country right now, which is going through just a brutal, just an absolutely brutal winter stretch right now. Um, I was actually in Southern California, right around LA last week, and it was a very pleasant 65, 70 degrees. And then I flew back to New York like 2 days ago. And boy, was I not ready for that transition. I went from 70 degrees leaving Los Angeles International Airport and arriving at JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport in New York City, where it was literally 15 degrees. So that was a big shock to my immune system. So, um, so again, wherever you are right now, especially if you're dealing with cold weather, if you're dealing with snow, if you're dealing with bad weather right now, please, 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 please stay safe, stay warm. If your home does not have heat, try to find a heating station or someplace. Just make sure that you are staying safe as the storm passes, right? Oh my gosh, Asher, yeah. And Asher, remind me where you located. I know you mentioned it earlier, but I think gosh, southern Kansas, right? Somewhere. Yeah, 8 degrees. My gosh. I can't even. I can't. I can't with that. So anyway, thank you all again for joining us for this GED live session. So with that, again, answer. So just like we did now, answer questions that I will ask you in class. I think, and give me a yes if you'd agree, it would be a really boring learning experience if I just read the slides out loud to you, right? In social studies, you must look for this and this and this. So let's look at question number one. To answer question number one, you must look at this, you must read this, and you get your answer, and the answer is A. Yay. Let's look at question two, right? I'm not going to do that, right? We want to make this a interactive experience, right? Where you kind of like learning from the mistakes you'll make. And you'll make mistakes in class. That's okay, right? I would rather you make the mistakes in class because for every mistake you make in class, you are less likely to make that mistake when it really matters. And everybody, you can tell me this. When is the only time it really matters if you get a question right? When's the only time it really matters? Exactly, Roger. Exactly, Khaled, right? Like on test day, on the actual exam. So make mistakes in class. It's okay, right? If you have a question about something, bring it up in the Q&A. I will ask you, what's the thought process behind this? Let us know so that we can make sure we can properly get aligned, right? Sometimes if you get a little misaligned in the thought process, we can correct you that way, right? All right, very good, very good. All right, so with that, so Roger, the different subject tests have different sort of like passing levels. You may want to check out the GD website that can give you a little bit more information on those kind of specifics. By the way, if you haven't already, the GD website has a lot of extra resources there. They do have, I believe you can access a practice test there as well. So definitely check that out when you get a moment. It's just the passing. The passing often is different based on the subject test and also what state you're living in, things like that. Okay. All right, so with that, let's take a look at our material for today. So, as we look at social studies, we're going to look at questions A lot of what we're going to look at tonight are like visual questions, right? Questions about visual data, questions about and analyzing visual information. So it's not as much about the reading, although certainly there will be some reading to do in our social studies questions today. But you can see here about like graphs, political cartoons, independent and dependent variables. Even and if you look at that last bullet point, don't freak out yet. Don't freak out, but we will even look at how things like mean and median and range and mode are tested on the social studies test as well. Okay. So that's our those are our learning objectives for today. So our first topic, right, or first thing we'll look at. And by the way, yes, if you haven't done so already, please save those links that teacher Laura put in the chat about how the GD scored and info on GD scores for passing. And thank you, Leah. Yes, the practice test there's a small fee attached to practice test. I personally think it's worth it because you get an authentic, true version of what the GD test is like. Okay, so when we talk, yes, as Leah mentioned, the practice test on the GD website, I think it's like $8 or so. But yeah, you can download it directly off the GD website. Okay. All right. So our first topic, or the first thing we're going to look at today is different types of visual information. Okay. And they can come in lots of different forms, right? So for instance, like graphs, maps, tables, charts, photographs, even political cartoons, right? Things like that, right? And and so what you want to do when you see this visual information, you want to be careful because let's be honest, like when you see a question that has a chart, don't your eyes just naturally gravitate to the chart, right? Right? It's like it stands out, right? It definitely just stands out, and it's like, oh, well, that seems important, so let me look at that. But you have to fight that temptation, right? You have to fight that temptation to try to dissect the graph or dissect the map or the chart right away. Instead, just take a few moments to simply first make sure you understand what the visual is about first before you start dissecting. And when I say dissecting, don't try to memorize numbers. Don't try to memorize all the different parts of the graph or the map or the chart. Don't try to memorize anything. But here are the important things. We've kind of listed them out here. You can see them on the slide there, right? But the important things, right? For instance, the title, right? Don't look at the individual numbers in the graph or chart, but look at the title first. So that, again, you have a sense of what that data is about. Not what is the data, but what is the data about? What is the data trying to convey? So you get that from the title. You get that from the labels, right? Like the horizontal and the vertical, right? Like what do those things represent? Excuse me, captions, which include legend. So captions, like if you have like a photograph or a cartoon, the caption, right, will tell you kind of like what's going on in the story regarding that photograph. The legend is like, for instance, if you have like a map, right, and like, oh, I mean, this is kind of silly, but in a legend, you might say the blue part, that's the water. The green part, that's the land, right? Obviously, the maps that you see on the GD are going to be a little bit more complex than that, but you get the idea, right? You know, it's that little square that tells you what the things represent on the map, right? So you want to look at that, right? And then what you want to do is, again, don't try to read every single number. Don't try to memorize any number. Just look at any obvious trends, themes, or patterns in the numbers. Also, check units of measurement. So for instance, right, like if it says like, 60 miles versus 60 meters. Ooh, now again, they're not going to ask you to figure out how many meters are in a mile, but it's like, oh, that data's different. That can save you from making a silly mistake, right? So check units of measurement and also check for trends. Like, again, you don't have to sit there and be like, well, it goes up by 10 units every 2 minutes. No, just like, all right, as time, the number is increasing over the time period, right? Or maybe the number is decreasing and then it's increasing after that. Again, just keep it very generalized. Keep it in terms of this, what's the pattern or what's the trend that you're noticing here in this data, okay? All right, again, as always, let us know in the Q&A with teacher Laura if you have any questions on this. Now, the other type of visual information, again, photographs, political cartoons. By the way, when I talk about political cartoons, there's like old political cartoons, right? There's like stuff that's clearly been established from history, right? Nothing recent, anything like that, right? But when you're analyzing photographs, again, just again, some of the things, and I don't want you to memorize this as a list, but just think, okay, what am I looking for when I look at the photograph or the political cartoon? What ideas or themes are being represented? Are there any written elements, and how do they relate to the topic? Is the image trying to support something or react against something, or is it just being neutral, right? So those are the things. Like, okay, this photograph is kind of like telling, is trying to encourage people to do this, or this political cartoon is trying to discourage people from voting for something, right? Like that's what you want to think about. Like, what's the tone here? What side is the image taking? And then again, if you see charts, graphs, or tables, again, like we mentioned before, the titles, the labels, the legend, what are the obvious themes or patterns? And again, how does this support the issue or go against the issue? So with that, let's take a look at our first our first social studies passage for today. Now, quick question. I know a lot of you mentioned this is a few of you mentioned this is your first time joining us for GD live session, but have any of you attended? For those of you who are GD veterans, have you attended any of our RLA sessions, the Reading Language Arts sessions? If you've attended any of those, you might be familiar with the idea of how to read, awesome, how to read, not to memorize everything, because let's be honest, are these passages going to be interesting on the GED Social Studies test? Are they going to be interesting? Are you going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to read about during World War One, the U.S. National War Garden Commission? Of course not, right? Leah, sorta, if you're lucky, let's be honest, right? If you're lucky, they'll be sort of interesting, right? But the reality is, it's probably not going to be that interesting, right? So, what you want to do, as Roger mentioned, Roger, you did attend those sessions, right? You want to kind of streamline your thinking here, streamline how you read these passages so that you're looking for the main topic or the main point, or sometimes a certain transitional word or keyword can give you a sense of direction about where the passage is going. I'll give you a quick example, actually. I know some of you don't read this passage yet, but let me give you a quick example, right, of what it means, of what a keyword is. Okay, if I said something like this, I'm going to actually put this on the screen. I like cats. For instance, blank. Give me something that would logically work in the blank. That would just simply make the sentence make sense in your own words. Put in anything you'd like. I like cats. For instance, blank. So, Roger, you're giving me an example of a type of cat that I like. Good. Miguel, give me an example of a color of a cat I like. I actually do have two black cats, Miguel. I don't know if you've attended a session before. Maybe I mentioned that before, but yes, I have two black cats. I love they were just wrestling each other for a moment ago. I like cats. For instance, silly cats. Yes, Asher, right? Like an example of a type of characteristic or quality that you'd like about those cats, right? So you're all giving me very logical examples of something that will fit in the blank, right? But what if I gave you this sentence instead? I like cats. However, blank. Fill in the blank in this case. I like cats. However, blank. Again, anything that would make this sentence logically work. I like cats. However, dogs are my favorite. I like cats. However, dogs are better. Ava, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that one. I do like dogs. I do like dogs. But I do like cats better. I like cats. However, I'm allergic to them. Olivine gave me a reason why you wouldn't like cats, right? Definitely the I'm allergic definitely comes up, right? However, I don't like the smell of their litter. Oh boy, Roger, as a cat father of two, yes, I can definitely attest why that the litter box can get very stinky. So notice, right? So notice in these two examples, you gave me very different fill in the blanks there, right? Very different. But what was literally the only difference in these two examples? Was literally the only difference. If you look at those sentences, what's the only difference? And specifically, Leo, what word? The transition word, the key word, right? In the first example, we had for instance. The words for instance helped you anticipate what's coming next, right? So when you see for instance, oh, there's going to be some sort of example. But when you saw the word however, what did that signal to you about the blank? As D mentions, exactly some sort of contrast. So you gave me some contrast, right? I like cats, however, I'm allergic to them, which would be a reason why you maybe not would not like cats, right? So that's the difference between for instance and however. That's how you can actually in some ways speed up your reading. Not to like memorize everything as you're going, but if you see a word like however, then you know there's going to be a contrast. If you see a word like for example, it's going to be a continuation. If you see a word like therefore, what do you suppose? Therefore blank. What sort of signal do you get from the word therefore blank? Tell me if you tell me if you have an idea, or tell me if you can answer that. If you said, or even if I said, like, I like cats, therefore, can you tell me what would fit in that sort of blank? Or because of that, good, right? I have my own, right? Some sort of conclude. And I like what you did there, Irma. I got three more, almost like a final statement, right? Almost like I'm putting a period on that, right? That's my thing. So the word therefore, for instance, might be like an example of a conclusion, right? Does that make sense? Or an effect. Yes, D, right? Cause and effect. I like cats is the cause. The effect, I'm going to go get a whole bunch of them. Give me a yes if that makes sense. Give me a quick yes in the chat if that makes sense. Let us know in the Q&A with teacher Laura if you need any clarification on that. So that's one of the ways to help you with this kind of reading style, about if you notice any particular like keywords or transitional words without having to memorize everything, you just know what to expect. Let's practice this with this passage. Take a look at the passage. I'm going to read this out loud, and I'm going to read this out loud. If your sound went out, try just logging out and logging back in. Sorry, I had to type it because you can't hear me if I say it. All right, so let's take a look at this passage. And again, as I'm reading this out loud, if there are certain words or certain phrases that you hear, they're like, okay, that's signaling something to me. That's telling me something about the main idea. I think, Roger, you mentioned that earlier, right? The main idea within this paragraph. Pop it in the chat. You don't even have to wait for me to finish reading the passage. Let's take a look at this one. During World War I, the U.S. National War Garden Commission began a campaign to encourage private citizens to grow their own food as a means of supporting the war effort. This practice, I'm going to stop right here actually. Even the word this. What makes the word, if this passage started with the sentence, this practice became very popular, what's the problem with that? If this passage started with this practice became very popular, you wouldn't know what the practice is, right? That became very popular, right? So you know that this, even the word this is referring to something. And what's it referring to? Oh, the private citizens growing their own food. Okay, so growing their own food became popular. Let's go on from there. With increased private food production, the government could reserve much of the cheaper mass produced food for the troops. The money saved in feeding soldiers freed up resources for other military needs. In addition, oh, stop right there. Just tell me what, when the sentence starts with the words in addition, what can you already know is coming after the words in addition? Adding more to it. Good. So in this case, right, well, if the sentence right before it said the money saved in feeding soldiers freed up resources, in addition, we're going to get another good thing, right? Another thing about the saving the money and making something good out of this. So let's look at the next sentence. Planting war gardens, also known as victory gardens, gave American citizens a sense of empowerment. So, what do we see from this paragraph, right? Well, the whole thing, again, we're not trying to memorize everything as we go, but this was about what? Planting, the practice of growing their own food. It helped with the war and it helped with citizens feeling good about the war, right? So basically, the main idea in this paragraph would be something like this. The National War Garden Commission, obviously, you don't need to write out all the words, but I do encourage you to at least jot down something when you're taking the test itself, right? Jot down a quick note about what the passage is about as you're reading. Don't wait till you get to the end of the passage. But as you're reading the passage, think, okay, what's the main thing that's being brought up? Oh, this whole thing about gardens and oh, it's growing their own food, helping the military, helping the war, right? So that's the paragraph, right? About how it encouraged private gardens. Give me a yes in chat. So far, so good up to this point, right? So we just looked at paragraph, right?